Good evening. I'm back reading the story, enjoying reading the story, and glad to have you with me. It's nice to have someone to read to. All right, I see that I've done it again and I haven't put on the camera. So, all right, let's see. Here we go. Okay. Out, is it? Goodness me, I'm organised. And I was here 3 minutes early and I've just been sitting around. I could have had everything organised. Home here. Not very bright sometimes. Not very bright. Go, that's better. Put that in there. And then check that you are actually hearing all this babbly, babbly, babbly. Babbly, babbly. Yes, yes, you're hearing babbly, babbly. And I see I've still got this funny lag thing happening. But it's raining again and it's very heavily overcast. So yeah, I'll give it a day or two and see if it clears up after the rain clears up. If it doesn't, I'll have to investigate. Okay, enough waffling. I'm going to finish off Jack's story today, and then tomorrow I'm going to be back with something else that I have not yet decided on. However, let's listen to the end of this. I've loved this story. I hope you have too. Chapter 43, Finale. As the lights went up, Mynheer de Villiers ascended the steps to the stage 2 at a time. "Please keep your seats, ladies and gentlemen," he asked. "I'm afraid we've had to close every door for the moment." There was a burst of laughter that turned into a groan at his weak joke, referencing the final song of the act, "Close every door to me." "It's just a temporary glitch, for which I apologize," he finished. The people of the audience looked at each other in confusion, and a buzz of talk broke out. Now that the orchestra was silent and there was no activity on the stage, everyone could hear strange noises from outside. Police sirens shrilled through the darkness, coming closer, or so it seemed, and there was a sound of tramping feet and raised voices and shouting commands. Detective Markham raised his head in disbelief, then stood up and moved towards the door. The prefect, standing guard around the sides of the hall, looked to Koos Venter. He stepped in front of the main door, and Jack stepped on his right and Zachary on the left. Unexpectedly, Palmer Conway moved out of his seat in the front row and ascended the stairs to the stage, taking up a position next to the headmaster. "I think we all deserve an explanation," he said. "I don't know what's happening," said Mynheer de Villiers. "The police are here, that's all I know." "Then I suggest you let Detective Markham go out and investigate what his men are doing," Palmer Conway said in a steely voice. "No, I can't do that," Mynheer de Villiers said. "I've been asked to keep everyone inside." Palmer Conway took a step closer to the headmaster, and with a flourish he pulled out a gun and waved it in his face. The watching audience reacted in terror. Several screams rang out, and people rose from their chairs. Palmer Conway turned the gun to face those assembled in the hall. "Sit down," he roared. Everyone sat, and an uncanny silence fell. "I'm going to take your precious headmaster outside, and no one had better try and stop me." Pushing Mynheer de Villiers down the steps and jabbing the gun between his shoulder blades, Palmer Conway made his way towards the door that Koos, Zachary, and Jack were guarding. "Move!" he shouted, raising the gun and swinging it from side to side. The boys moved to the side, and Chris Venter made to open the door. "Now," he yelled, "rugby tackle!" Jack and Zachary dived for Detective Markham and crashed into him, catching him off guard. He was thrown heavily onto the ground as Koos leapt for Palmer Conway and kneed him in the stomach. The gun sailed out of his hand as he doubled over with a cry of agony. Jack stood in one swift movement and caught the gun just as the door crashed open and the Nelspruit police burst into the room. It was a long interval. Palmer Conway and Detective Markham were arrested and led out of the hall in handcuffs. It appeared that many of their associates were picked up too, including 2 burly security guards found lurking in Mynheer de Villiers' yard. Rose Summerfield apologized contritely to her parents-in-law for her lack of judgment in befriending Palmer Conway, and was forgiven. There are no rules with a con man. Even I didn't realize what he was up to, and I actually hired a private detective to investigate him, Jack's grandfather said. "Why ever did you do that?" Rose asked, her brows together. "It was Jack," her father-in-law said. "He was onto Conway right from the beginning. You have quite a watchdog in your son." Just then Mynheer de Villiers called everyone back into the hall. "I'm at a loss for words," he began. "I can only apologize for the horrendous events of this evening. I am sure no one wants to watch Act 2 of our musical after what you've just witnessed. There was a mumbling that grew to a rumbling from the audience. Some Pied Piper Timothy had turned out to be, but then Barberton folk were a hardy lot. "Act 2!" they were all shouting. And Timothy stole the show again. His glorious voice rang out clear and true, and he demonstrated that indefinable quality, stage presence. From the start, he enraptured the audience. He was pitch perfect and word perfect. Elaine was not the only teacher who sat open-mouthed as they witnessed the transformation of Timothy from the class clown and underachiever to the star. When the musical was over, the cast took bow after bow and sang until they were hoarse. It had been a wonderful evening. Mynheer de Villiers and Elaine stood to thunderous applause for the success of the production, the ability of their students, and as an accolade to their leadership. Chapter 44. Unwinding at the Summerfields. Jack was euphoric. He wished the night would never end. He saw his grandparents standing outside the hall with his mother, and he heard them persuading Elaine to accompany him. "I know what you're like, my love," Glynis said. "You always need time to unwind after an event like this. Come home with us. I prepared a feast just in case. We will give you something to eat and drink, and then you can be on your way." She saw Jack and turned to him, drawing him into the circle of her arms. "Jack, you come too, and invite whoever you want." When Jack arrived, it seemed to him that everyone in the cast had accepted the invitation, and the double-story house built around the noble fig tree was crowded. He stood in the doorway of the wide, gracious living room, taking in the scene. Rose, immediately surrounded by several admirers, was holding court at one end. Mynheer de Villiers walked in with Elaine, and they sat down together on a couch by the window. Mr. Porter joined them, and then Mr. Kenworthy. The mayor was there, determined to buttonhole Guy Summerfield. Jack heard him say. "The secretary who used to work for your son, Grace Kahari. I haven't been able to find her. We desperately need her to work at the council. Ask her to come and see me urgently." Jack wandered through the room looking for his friends. Bits of conversation floated in the air. "Mr. Kenworthy, congratulations on a magnificent performance from your orchestra. We are seriously considering appointing you to set up a Barberton orchestra. That was the best play I've ever seen. Who did the costumes? Fancy Palmer Conway being this big drug lord. You never can tell, can you? These snacks are delicious. Try these." He walked through to the dining room. True to her word, his grandmother had loaded the long oak table with a wonderful array of snacks. 4 great lights that hung on chains from the ceiling illuminated the room. Everything shone, from the sparkling cutlery to the piles of plates and the silver dishes. Most of the cast, however, had dispensed with the elegant and had loaded paper plates with food and helped themselves to drinks and then headed out onto the patio. Some of them were sitting on the chairs around the table. Others draped themselves over the low walls or leaned up against the rough bark of the ancient fig tree, sprawled on the stone floor, or propped themselves against each other. Jack found Kate and sat down next to her. Her eyes drooped and her long eyelashes fluttered on her cheeks. Tiredness washed over her. The ghost of a lopsided grin hovered on her lips. "You were wonderful, Kate," Jack said admiringly. "All those curtain calls, I thought they'd never stop." He pulled her close, lacing his fingers through hers. "Me too," Kate croaked, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Listen to my voice. I don't think I could have sung one more encore." But it was Timothy. "Timothy!" everybody yelled, and Timothy unrolled his lanky form from around the tree and gave a courteous Elizabethan-style 3-step bow. "You saved the play from disaster," said Dan. "I nearly freaked when Miss Summerfield tried to make me go on. But how did you ever know what to do and say?" "I've been to every rehearsal," Timothy said. "It's been the best time of my life." Dan groaned. "I always knew you were crazy," he said. "That just proves it." "Did you see his mom's face when he swirled around in the coat of many colors?" Kate croaked in a husky voice. She looked like she would burst with pride. "Well, he always was a show-off," Solomon piped up unexpectedly. Everyone laughed. "The drama with the musical was one thing," Zachary said. "But what about when that Palmer Conway fellow pulled the gun on stage and threatened Mynheer de Villiers?" "Who'd have thought that anything like that would happen in sleepy old Barberton?" Adam said in belief. Adam asked in disbelief. "You must have had an inkling," said Jack, turning to Innocent, "when you set up the Go-Go Guard. You're something of an unsung hero in all of this. We wouldn't be celebrating if you hadn't mobilized the forces." He stood up and walked over to where Innocent was standing, leaning against the tree. He slapped Innocent on the back and shook his hand vigorously. Everyone crowded around Innocent, congratulating him. "It was Koos, too. Koos, that rugby tackle was amazing. You caught everyone off guard," said Innocent. "Thank goodness you disabled Palmer Conway and Detective Markham." "Foolhardy, I call it," said Annabelle. "Did you think about the risk? Mynheer de Villiers could have been shot." "Ah, well, then we wouldn't have had to write the test on Monday," Koos said. Annabelle looked at him and gasped in disbelief. "I was only joking," said Koos. "I can't believe I'm saying this," said Timothy, "but I've never been so glad to see the police in my life." What I can't believe is that we carried on with Act 2. It gives new meaning to the expression, the show must go on, Dan said. Talking about that, we need to tell Ramon. It's break a leg and not break an arm. Poor guy, I hope he's okay. Yes, he is. My mum phoned the hospital, Kate said. Timothy stood up. Come on, my fellow thespians, as Miss Summerfield calls us, he said with a huge smile. Do what she would encourage you to do, and turn to the person next to you and shake them by the hand. Admit everyone was wonderful. You're right, Timothy, Annabel sang out. It wasn't just wonderful Kate and wonderful Timothy, it was all the Dreamcoat cast. That seemed to be the cue for parents to swoop in and collect their offspring, who were replete and yawning and only too happy to go home and sleep. When Jack fell into bed that night, it was with a smile on his face. Life was good. Chapter 45. What now? It was the last English lesson of the year. Jack settled into his desk and stretched out his legs. The desk felt a bit smaller somehow, as if it had shrunk. His eyes played around the room as he took in the familiar posters and pictures that had been the backdrop to the language and literature he had experienced over the last months. They were challenging, informative, humorous, and colourful, and provided the ambience of the classroom. He took a deep breath, inhaling that special chalk, dust, and human bodies smell endemic to the classroom. Today we will have a round-table discussion, Elaine said, as she bustled round the room, handing back their essay books. I asked you all to write your reflections on where you're at right now. Let's hear what you have to say. Who would like to go first? Me, said Dan unexpectedly. I might as well get it over with. There was a rumble of amusement from the rest of the class. They were all too aware of Dan's love-hate relationship with the subject. I started my essay, I can't wait to leave school. I didn't mean to be rude. You've ticked it and written strong opening sentence, so it was all right to be so blatant? Well, I think you wrote what everybody's feeling, so you get to this point in your life. Dan's wide smile swept around the classroom. He wasn't used to being in sync with his thoughts and emotions. He wasn't used to being in sync with the thoughts and emotions of his fellow students in the class. Most of my essay was about rugby. I started with the World Cup last year, and I wrote about the matches we've played this year. I feel so lucky to have been at school like this, with the emphasis on sport and the adventure race. I can't wait to take up the rugby scholarship next year. Do I get what you're saying? That sport is the most important thing at school? Asked Annabel, her voice dripping with disbelief, as she regaled him to his usual position. You really are a Philistine. Dan blinked at her. I don't even know what that means, he said. Someone who's hostile to culture, a jock, Annabel said. Do you really think sport is the most important thing? Not the most important, but very important, Dan answered. Elaine intervened. Whoa, no judgments, please. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. We all need to respect that. Moving on, let's hear from you, Zachary. I've come a long way in my thinking since I started here, said Zachary, amazing the students with his serious and insightful words. When I first walked into this classroom, I was determined to hate you all, and no one really tried to change my mind. The way I remember it, I was totally ignored. I didn't like anything about the school or the lessons or the teachers. Elaine gave him a friendly glance, and he faltered. Sorry, Miss Summerfield. It was me, really, not you. Then do you remember that Ben Okri lesson? At first I was infuriated that you were all passing judgment on my people and my way of life. But by the end of that lesson, something changed in my heart. And I think that's when I realized that the real me could be accepted in this new world I found myself in. Well, I started to realize perhaps I still had a way to go. Anyway, his words have always stuck with me. This life is good. I've written his words out and I keep them in my wallet. There was an awkward silence. Zachary had bared his soul, and no one knew how to react. He seemed unaware of the effect of his words, however. He turned to Annabel with a distinctly mischievous look, and he said, "And I agree with Dan about the rugby. Sorry, Annabel. If you've played it, you'd know." Everyone laughed as Annabel shuddered. "Sorry, Dan," she said. "I was out of line." Dan gave her a broad smile. "I may as well go next," she said. Putting on the musical was the biggest undertaking of my life. I was so involved with the costumes and makeups and getting to know some of the cast really well, and I have never been so busy or so happy. My reflections in my essay were all about what I learned about myself, having to organize meetings and photo shoots and solving practical problems with the cast and the different personalities. And I feel I really could do that. So I've decided to go into some sort of human relations or psychology course next year when I go to university. Acting in Joseph was also life-changing for me, said Timothy. This song in particular. He stood up, and without the least embarrassment he sang, "Any dream will do, any dream will do." "You must have a dream," he said, "and then you must interpret your dream. My dream is to go onto the stage. I'm going to make that happen." "That's great, Timothy," said Elaine. "Judging by your amazing performance in Joseph, I think I can speak for everyone when I say we don't doubt it." Adam, I can see you want to say something. "I have a dream too," said Adam, "but it's kind of fuzzy. I'm going to walk with a loose jiggling motion into my future. Whatever I end up doing will be something I really enjoy." "That's important too, Adam. What about you, Jack?" Jack leaned back in his chair, his essay book open in front of him. "This is what I wrote," he said. "Reflecting on the end of my school career has been tricky. I feel like Stransky must have felt the moment before he kicked the drop goal in the Rugby World Cup. All his training and experience was about to be put to the test. And I think that's where I am right now. All my life has been leading up to this one moment. And what have I learned at school? Well, first, there's more to education than academics and sport. I don't think I could have got through this year without my friends. So it has been academics and sport and social for me. Then mixing with and getting to know people from different cultures and trying to figure out how I am the product of my culture and to respect other cultures has been a huge part of this year for me. The production of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat meant a lot to me. Joseph was cruelly ripped away from his father and had to grow up without him, but he survived. Then the jealousy among his brothers that had such serious consequences showed me how destructive an emotion jealousy is. It is something I struggled with. And the themes of forgiveness pulled all the messy emotions together and was deeply personal for me. So school has been academic and sport and social and cultural. Finally, the defining happening of my life was the totally unexpected, shattering death of my father, which brings me to the fifth part of my education, spiritual. I value life as a gift in a way I did not before. I have to ask, what now? Jack put his essay book down on his desk, and his eyes travelled slowly around the room. He saw acknowledgement, recognition, understanding, and connection. as his classmates looked back at him. As they savoured his ideas, their faces reflected their reactions to his words. This was a special moment, one to be treasured. The bell rang, and the last lesson of the year was over. Well, well, well. All right. And the book is over. And that very first venture into reading a book is over, and I loved it. And if you have any suggestions about what I should read next, do drop it on the comments. I'd love to hear your opinion and what you thought of the story. And yeah, as I say, if there's anything else you would like to know, please, anything else you'd like to hear, please let me know. Okay, thank you so much for joining me for that book. It was quite intense reading my mother's words and knowing some of the things that she was referring to from my childhood, like the oak table, the big oak table. Bless you all. Thank you so much for joining me.